Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. Today we will begin with the next set of verses, in particular verse 40 to 62. So in our previous sessions, we have covered the first 39 verses, and as you would be knowing that they form the introduction to the whole surah. So you know that the surah is divided into various sections, and the first section is actually an introduction. And in this regard, it is much similar to how we generally arrange an article or book that we might write. In general, we start off with an introduction, we have a conclusion, and then we have a main body or a main text. So this surah also, you'll see as we go along, follows exactly the same pattern. The first 39 verses, they constitute its introduction. It's like a prelude to the whole discussion. And you'll also see that from here, which is verse 40, where we'll start, that the real addressees of the surah, they are addressed, and they are the Jews and the Bani Israel. And this address will continue, and near the middle of the surah, you'll find the believers being given this position that the Israelites are being deposed from their position of Shahada and their bearing of witness to the truth. And in their place, a new ummah is being installed. So basically, we are now into the main part of the surah, the earlier part, which was the introduction and prelude. Of course, we knew from its study that it addressed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ earlier on, gave him assurance, and in between that address, once it was finished, we found that the idolaters of Medina were also addressed, because we know that they too lived. I mean, idolaters just did not live in Mecca, they also lived in Medina, so they also needed to be addressed. So let us now start off with this set of verses that we are going to study. So our pattern would be the same, that I will translate one paragraph, explain some of the important aspects of that paragraph, and then you can ask questions related to that paragraph, and then inshallah we'll move ahead. So starting off, Ya Bani Israel uskuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum wa awfu bi ahdi ufi bi ahdikum wa iyaya farhabun. O Israelites, recall my favor which I had bestowed upon you, and keep my covenant. I shall keep yours, and keep fearing me, and profess faith in this Quran which I have revealed in confirmation of what you have. So I've just moved a little ahead of the actual translation in Arabic. وَآمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلْتُ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِهِ. So it says that profess faith. When it says Aminu, profess faith. And of course, here the reference is to profess faith in the Quran. Aminu bima anzaltu, because it says that this is what has been revealed, and which I have revealed in confirmation of what you have. So the Almighty is telling them that if you keep your covenant, I'm going to keep my covenant, and profess faith in this book that I have revealed, and this is in confirmation of what is already before you, and do not be the first people who deny it. وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِهِ وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِي ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا وَإِيَّايَ فَاتَّقُونَ. And do not sell my revelations for a paltry price, and fear my wrath. And then it says, وَلَا تَلْبِسُوا الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتَكْتُمُوا الْحَقَّ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And do not mingle truth with falsehood. This is an effort to hide the truth, and do not try to conceal the truth deliberately. So this is to see something that has to be understood. Taktumul haqqa wa antum ta'lamun. So hiding the truth, and that too deliberately. And then the verses go on. Wa aqimus salata wa atuz zakata warka'u ma'ar raqi'in. So the translation is, and be diligent in the prayer, and pay the zakah, and you also bow down before God with those who do so. So aqimus salata wa atuz zakata warka'u ma'ar raqi'in. And then أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you urge people to virtue and forget yourselves, even though you recite the book of God? Then do you not understand? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not understand? وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. and to tread on this path, seek help from perseverance and from the prayer. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. And undoubtedly, all this is exacting, but not to those who fear the Almighty. So, إِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. It is exacting for all those who do not fear the Almighty. And then the paragraph finishes here, الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. So it says that it is exacting, but not for those who fear the Almighty. Now, the last part is, and who think that they have to meet their Lord, and that to Him alone also they have to return one day. So this is the first part, or the first paragraph of this section of verses. Now, a couple of things that might need explanation, I'd like to divulge them as well. So the first thing is the fact that we have to understand that the Hebrew word for Abdullah is actually Israel. So Israel is an exact translation, or Abdullah is an exact translation, so to speak, of the Hebrew word Israel. So El in Hebrew actually means God, and Isra is Abd, like in Arabic. So the exact translation of the word Israel would be Abdullah. So basically, this was the title of the prophet Jacob, and he was given this title in the Bible. We know in the Old Testament he is regarded to be Israel, and therefore the progeny of Abraham, which started from Isaac actually, and then went on from Jacob to Joseph and all the way up to Jesus, which had a stream of long stream of prophets coming in them for almost 2,500 years, or at least 2,000 years. You see that this was the singular honor which they occupied, in which a whole nation was chosen for the position of Shahada. And if you see that the words are, Ya Bani Israel, uzkuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum. Israelites, recall my favor which I bestowed upon you. So what was that favor? That favor was that they were actually deputed at the position of Shahada, which means to deliver the truth, become witnesses of the truth before other people. So this was their position, and they were actually deputed on this position as a nation, as a whole, as a collectivity. So for a very large part of time, almost 2 millenniums, they were on this position, and there were instances in which they did behave, and they did, there were instances in which they were able to generally carry out some of the responsibilities, but then we had those instances as well, and perhaps they abound, in which they shirk this responsibility. So what is happening is, remember that the Quran is addressing them right in front of them. They are standing there, the Jews are standing there in Medina, and the Quran is telling them that, recall, O people of Israel, O Israelites, O Bani Israel, that the favor of Shahada, the favor of choosing you for this purpose. And this is from here you can see that the whole issue of the chosen Ummah has arisen in the minds of the Bani Israel, or the Jews, and it still is with them, because they think that they have not been deposed. The fact is that the Almighty did call them to this position. He deputed them to this position. But then, as we shall see later on, because of their misgivings and misdoings, they were deposed, and they no longer enjoyed that position. But the Israelites of today, or the Banu Ibrahim, or let's say the Jews of today, they still think that they hold this position, and they think that they are the chosen people of God. And one subtle thing that you might need to note here is, the Almighty says, O Israelites, recall my favor which I had bestowed upon you, and keep my covenant. So you see, the subtle part is the Almighty is saying it's my favor, which tells them actually, which is a very slant on their view, that they were entitled to this position. So this was something of a naivety on their part, a foolish notion on their part. And the Almighty is actually telling them that it's not that you are entitled to this position, it is me who has given you this as a favor, and therefore you need to acknowledge that. So it's my favor on you, and not that you will be people who are going to have this as a result of your own entitlement to it. Also, you can see that the next part is that وَأَوْفُوا بِأَهْدِي أُوفِي بِأَهْدِكُمْ. And if you keep your promise, keep my covenant, I shall keep yours. So if you keep, the Almighty is saying that if you keep my promise, I shall keep your promise. Now, what exactly is that promise? That promise has been mentioned in detail in the Torah, and which is that they were given this responsibility that one day, one instance in time would be such that there would be a prophet of God who would come from their brethren, their cousins, the Ishmaelites, and when they come, they will have to believe in him. And such is the importance of this covenant. You can see that at the very beginning, the Almighty has reminded them that if you fulfill your promise, and I will fulfill my promise to them, which was that they will always be in this position of Shahada, and they will always be the foremost nation of the world. So what exactly was their promise? And you can see that I'm just going to read out a text from the Torah, which will tell you that this promise, what the nature of this promise was. So this is the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is the fifth book of the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Old Testament. So just listen to what this prediction says. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me among your own brothers. So this is Moses talking to them. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me among your own brothers, referring to the Ishmaelites. So remember, the Ishmaelites are descendant from the prophet Ishmael, and the Israelites are descendants from the prophet Isaac. So Moses is telling them that there is going to be a time in which there's going to be a prophet like me. His likeness would be, he would resemble me in many of my positions and many of my measures that I would take. And when he comes to you, you must listen to him. And then it says, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command them. If anyone does not listen to my words that he speaks in my name, then I myself will call him to account. So you see, this was the promise which the Israelites were bound to obey and to honor. They were told that, yes, this is something that's going to happen. And remember, this is coming from the mouth of their own prophet, their own celebrated prophet Moses. So Moses is telling them that when this happens, of course, he never knew when this would happen. We know the prophet came after him about more than a millennium after he departed. So all that Moses did was that he took this covenant that whenever that prophet comes from your cousins, from the other branch of Banu Ibrahim, you will have to honor him. You will have to follow him. And look what it says near the end. If anyone does not listen to my words and speaks in my name, then I myself will call him to account. So you see, this was the vehement nature of the promise. And one thing that you can clearly see, you've just read the first verse, that how important it is to read the Torah and have a knowledge of the Torah, because unless you don't have this knowledge, you will not be able to connect to these words. You see, the Quran is speaking to the Jews as if what the Torah has told them is known to every person. So if you don't know what this promise is, we'll just get confused at what exactly is the promise God is talking about. So it's clearly understood to the Israelites of those times that it is a reference to their own book, and hence the importance of reference of the Quran to the holy book. And in this regard, you have to understand that as far as this understanding is concerned, that unless we are able to have recourse to some of the previous scriptures in this regard, you will not be able to understand the purport of the Quran in totality. So the next part that we need to understand regarding some of the issues which have been raised here is that the Quran says, وَآمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلْتُ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِهِ. And it says that profess faith in this Quran which I have revealed in confirmation of what you have. So the Almighty says, now is the time that prophet has arrived. That prophet has arrived, and now you have to keep that promise in mind. And look what it says, that it is come as a confirmation. It's a revealing confirmation of what you have, referring to the predictions of the arrival of the last prophet, which were found in the Torah and which we have studied elsewhere when we were studying some of the other sessions or other courses. So it's not the occasion here, but of course there are detailed articles and sessions on this in which you will see that the arrival of the last prophet was predicted in such clear and such vehement words that I mean, unless you are in a position to deny it intentionally, as the Quran has said, "Wantum ta'lamun," that it's not that you're denying this prophet because of any confusion. You know that "Antum ta'lamun," your denial is deliberate. So one important thing that we have to understand here is that the Quran speaks of the fact that when the Almighty says that you have to believe in God, in this book, then it's a book which has come in confirmation of the predictions about which the Torah is very vocal, and it says that, look here, this is the book of God that is going to be revealed. The last prophet has to come, and now that he has come, with this book, you have to profess faith with him, which actually tells us that the arrival of the last prophet was so clearly predicted in the previous scriptures. And the important thing which also here has to be noted, as I have just also referred to, is the fact that it says وَلَا تَكْتُمُوا الْحَقَّ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So it says that do not mingle truth with falsehood, and do not try to conceal the truth deliberately. So this was the biggest, you can say, the biggest mistake or the biggest blunder which the Jews, or of course we can see clearly that here that their scholars are being addressed, because it was they who would mix up truth with falsehood. It was they who would hide some of the verses of the Torah from their common masses, which predicted the arrival of the last prophet. And you can clearly see, dear viewers, that the reason for the Almighty's anger, which rages throughout Surah Baqarah, is because of the fact that they consented to Moses that yes, we will honor the covenant, but when the time came, they became its first rejectors. You see, the Quran says, "Wala takunu awwala kafirin bihi." I mean, you were supposed to profess faith as soon as the book arrived, as soon as the prophet arrived. And what happened? You became its first rejectors. So it's like a sorrowful situation, a sorry figure that they have painted in this regard. And now also please pay attention to these words, that it says that وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِي سَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. So this means that do not sell my verses for a paltry price, which means that, I mean, when you are doing so, you absolutely know what the truth is. But when you give preference to disbelief, what you're doing is that you are selling God's revelation for a paltry price. Ishtara, the word ishtara, which actually means to sell, in ancient Arabic, and still in a lot of usages, it refers to giving preference to something. So it's like saying that you are giving preference, as the words say, in a way that you are the first rejectors of this book, as it says, and then at the same time, you are the ones who are selling my verses for a paltry price. Of course, this doesn't mean that you can sell the verses if you get a hefty price. It's just a manner of expression in which the heinous nature of their crime is being expressed. So it's not that they can sell it for a good price. And it says that you are selling it, and that too for a paltry price. This is the stress that has to be understood. And then you see, one of the important thing is that this concealment of the truth, which you can see is apparent from the verses of the Quran, says, "La talbisul haqqa bil batili wa taktumul haqqa," that do not hide the truth. Now, what was this thing that they were doing? If you study the rest, the areas in which the Jews have been addressed in some of the other surahs of the Quran, and here also as we go along, the biggest blunder, or I would say the biggest concealment they were guilty of, which is evident from other parts, is that they wanted to sever the connection of Prophet Abraham with Arabia, so that the arrival of the last prophet would not be connected to Prophet Muhammad, because it was he who actually was the person sent as the last prophet from the land of Arabia. So they tried to sever this connection of Abraham to Arabia, and all those places which are mentioned in Arabia as the places in which Prophet Muhammad would be there, and he would actually be in a position to bear this last witness. And before him, centuries before him, Prophet Abraham, who settled his son Ishmael, the eldest son, there. So all the places like the seven trees or the Beer Saba, and you'll find them being severed. Even the valley of Mina, or the whole place which is called Marwa, you'll find them that they actually dislocated the Marwa, which was found in Arabia, and they had it actually on the map of Palestine, so that the connection would be severed from Prophet Abraham. Another thing that you might know here is that the Quran is telling them that وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, that you be diligent in the prayer and also pay zakah, which tells them, I mean, this which is something which is of a very common knowledge to them, that yes, salah and zakah was something that they knew well, and they had disfigured them. We know they had made changes in them, and we know that as the Quran at one place says azar salah, that they had ended up wasting parts of its posture. So we clearly see that the Jews still pray, but they don't pray in a way that was ordained for them. Thus, they don't kneel, they don't prostrate, they just stand in prayer. So parts of the prayer were neglected by them. Similar was the case with the zakah. So you see, what the Quran is doing is, it is pointing out their chart sheet, and at the same time telling them that, look, this is the covenant that you had yourself said that you would honor. And you were the people to whom Abraham and earlier on your own, all prophets, including Moses and David and Jesus, had said that you must stick to Salah and Zakah. But you are the ones who did not properly honor this covenant. And not only did you not honor the coming of the last prophet, but you also are guilty of forsaking Salah and Zakah. So again, this is this tells us that we have to we have to understand that Salah and Zakah, which is the prayer and Zakah, they are not rituals which were started by Prophet Muhammad. They were started much earlier with the inception of the Sharia, which was given to Abraham, and even before him, we find these practices, these worship rituals, to be there. So another thing that you might need to note here is this verse 33. It starts off with "Atamuruna an-nasa bil birri wa tansawna anfusakum wa antum tatluna al-kitab," which shows that you urge people to virtue and forget yourselves, even though you recite the book of God. So now you can clearly see that the Quran is actually primarily addressing the leaders and the scholars of Jews, and not the commoners. It's not addressing the commoners, but because they were guilty of this, that they would ask people to be good, to be righteous, but they themselves had a very bad character. And this is something which has been portrayed also in the gospel, when Prophet Jesus actually reprimanded them. Let me just read out a part of that from the gospel. So you can see that this gospel, the part that I'm going to read out from you, is from the Gospel of Luke, and this is chapter number 11, verse 46. And exactly here, as the Prophet Jesus had said, or Prophet Muhammad, in the time of Prophet Muhammad, when the Almighty was telling these Jews that you are people, you scholars are people who enjoin justice and virtue and righteousness and piety to other people, but look at your own selves, who you are. So look how Prophet Jesus addresses them. So this is Gospel of Luke, chapter number 11, verse 46. He says, "And you experts in the law, woe to you, doomed be you, woe to you, perdition be to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly handle, and you yourself will not lift one finger to help them." So this is how they would ask people to do things that they never be able to do themselves. And as a result, you can clearly see that Prophet Jesus, when he was there with them in his own times, he reprimanded them. And at one instance, the Quran has even said regarding Prophet Moses that "La takunu kallazina azaw Musa," O Israelites, or people of the followers of Abraham and Abrahamic religion, or Bani Ismail, do not be people who are the Israelites who harassed Moses, Azaw Musa, who harassed Moses, who were in a position to really make him feel the fact that as a prophet, he was there for them. He had come down as a person who would give them guidance, but they ended up harassing him, and they were the people who were never satisfied. When they were in the desert of Sinai, they knew they would not be content with the food which is given to them, and we will see how this is coming up in the next section of verses. But I'm going to stop here, and if you have any questions regarding this first paragraph, now is the time to please raise them.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for attending today. The first question will be from Noguer. Noguer, please go ahead.
Dr. My name is Ahmed. my question is regarding that why Quran is very specific about the Israelis, but the Quran is quite about the fate of the Ismailites. So can you just explain that on why it's happening like that?
This is because, you see, Israelites were given this position of Shahada, which means to bear witness to the truth. And this actually continued for about 2,500 years. And there were prophets which came to the Israelites one after the other. And there was a time in which the prophet who would be leaving would actually would baptize the prophet who would be following him. And this was as if in a chain that one after the other, several prophets came. So a nation who had a history of 2,500 years of prophets coming to them, and they're being actually deputed to this position of bearing witness to the truth, and continuously they're not honoring their promise, and they're not honoring the arrival of the last prophet. And before even we speak about the last prophet, they did the same with Prophet Jesus. So remember, Jesus was the person who they intended to crucify, although they never succeeded. And when the last prophet came, he, of course, again, they instead of acknowledging him, they denied him. So they were guilty of denying two prophets of God, and Jesus and Muhammad. So this was a story of the fact that after Prophet Abraham, the Almighty had actually divided the delivery of the truth, or the dissemination of the truth, into a whole nation. So the Israelites were the first who were chosen for this task. And once they became guilty of that, they were deposed. Now, as far as the Ishmaelites are concerned, they were the ones who were given this position after the Israelites were deposed. But they are told that if they follow the Israelites, then the Almighty is going to behave with them in the same way. In Urtum Orduna. And we find several verses of the Quran telling them that if they are going to follow in the footsteps of the Israelites, then my yardstick is the same for both. And I'm going to punish you as well, and you are going to be doomed as well. So today we find the Ishmaelites in their collective capacity to be equally under the law of the Almighty, in which we find them totally decimated and totally not in one collectivity, and they are at the mercy of other nations. So that law of the Almighty is still continuing.
Many thanks. The next question is Ruhi. Ruhi, please, if we can stay relevant to the topic today. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Sir,
ये जो the phrase wala takunu awwala kafirin bihi, would you please explain it once again? Because were the Jews the first ones to negate what was revealed in Quran? How can
that is? I mean, the fact is that they were the first ones to. They were expected to be acknowledge the last prophet, because his arrival was predicted in their own scriptures. So they were the ones who were actually expected to believe in him, because they were awaiting his arrival. The Quran tells us at other instances that they were actually waiting for his arrival, but as a result of their own arrogance, and as a result of the fact that they could not tolerate the fact that he would come, or he should come, from the cousin nation, they were the first to deny it. So the word first doesn't mean that they were first in its chronological fashion, in its historical way, because we know that earlier on the idolaters had already denied. Here it actually is an expression to tell them that you were the people who were expected to accept the prophet and take lead in that, and to be foremost in accepting him. You should have been the most in accepting him, but when the time came to accept him, that was not the fact. So the word first is not actually referring to the fact that they were the first in rejecting them, but it is actually pointing to the fact that they were expected to do so as soon as the prophet had arrived, but they became his first deniers.
We have another question by Nathar. Nathar, please go ahead.
Sir. So my question is, you mentioned something about Marwa. I could not get that.
So you see, Marwa was the place where Ishmael was intended to be sacrificed, or this was the place where he was sacrificed. But they actually, first what they did was they replaced the name of Ishmael with Isaac, and then they said that this word Marwa is not situated in Medina, but it is situated in Mecca, but it's situated somewhere in Palestine. So that whatever predictions or whatever the Bible talks about regarding the sacrifice of Abraham, it should have no connection with the land of Arabia. It should have connection with the land of Palestine. And because we know that in the land of Palestine, Isaac was actually, and his progeny, they were settled there and they were made to inhabit there, the land there. So their whole enterprise was to sever the connection of Abraham with Medina. So if it was somehow the people were made to believe that Abraham never came to Medina, to land of Arabia, and he remained in Palestine, and the sacrifice which is being talked about was also of Isaac and not of Ishmael, and the place which is called Marwa is also situated in Palestine. So this would actually, as you can see, be very effective in telling people, well, everything or all history which is going to take place later on is going to be in the land of Palestine and not in Arabia.
Many thanks. Ahmed Sahab, please go ahead.
Yeah. Dr. It's a continuation of the first question I asked. So can we consider, so whatever happened to the Ismailiyat after Banu Umayyah, Banu Abbas, and after the Banu Osmani Sultanate is the punishment the God has given to the Ismailiyat? Can we see that like that, or we can consider like that?
Actually, you see, Ismailites basically they were the people who lived in Arabia in those times. They were the Sahaba in those times, and their own collectivity continued as far as the Caliphate continues. But you can see that in various instances and various periods of time, they could not behave as one collectivity. And as soon as the Umayyads took over, or the Abbasids took over, all of them, they had their own pitfalls and they were faced with the same situation. So the whole process is not just confined to a few moments in history or a few dynasties. It's basically something which is continuing ever since the Ummah was constituted. Yes, in the first 30 years, maybe in the rightly guided caliphate, this was there they were there as a collectivity. They were discharging their duty, but later on, as you can see, that this decadence set into them, and slowly and surely they lost their position of authority and their position of bearing witness, and that has continued ever since.
Thank you very much. And Naveed, you're next. Please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Doctor, I was asking whether they believe that Ismail alayhi salam was a prophet or not. Do Jews believe that?
Well, I mean, that I'm not very sure of if they believe him as a prophet or not, but surely they do believe that he was not the son who was sacrificed. Okay. They say they in their own scripture they say it was Isaac who was sacrificed, and I think that yes, they did acknowledge him later on as a prophet to the best of my understanding, but I would need to check that. But you see, the real thing that we have to understand here is that once they replaced the name of Ishmael with Isaac, the whole history got rewritten. So whether Ishmael was acknowledged by them or not has become secondary, because to them, basically the last prophet or the last person who should come in that lineage should also be from their own lineage, which is the Israelites, and anyone who's outside the Israelites is not going to be believed by them.
Okay. Is there any बाइबल में कुछ ऐसा है कि जिससे हमें पता चले कि ये इसको कंडेम किया गया या फिर बाइबल में क्लैरिटी दी गई क्या बाद में कि इस ताल्लुक से?
Regarding what?
रिगार्डिंग की जो है ज़बी है जो हजरत इस्माइल अलैहिस्सलाम है और ये इन्होंने जो किया है गलत है.
So you see, if you study the Old Testament, if you study the Torah, they have clearly expunged the name of Ismail from there. All you'll find there is the name of Isaac. But such is this, I would say, the nature of this interpolation, that if you read Ustaz Hamiduddin Farai's book on this, you'll find in the book that how he has shown that even if the name of Ishmael has been just deleted from there, but the way it still exists, and the adjectives which are used, for example, it is said that you have sacrificed your firstborn and your only son. I mean, the words which are to be noted is that the Torah still says that the only son. So this cannot be spoken of Isaac. because he was not the only son. Ishmael was older to him. So whenever the word only is used, it can only be used when he is the only living person there. But they also themselves acknowledge that yes, Ismail was there and he was older to Isaac. So the word only son cannot be spoken of Isaac because Ishmael was already there. So you see, there are some areas which they have still left there, which have a result. I mean, blown away their connivance, and it's like detecting them that even if the name of Isaac is not there, but the way Ishmael is not there, but the way it is mentioned, or the way Isaac is mentioned, or the way these sons are mentioned, they can clearly, I mean, only refer to Ishmael, because they said the only son can only be spoken of Ishmael when he was the eldest, and as long as he was alive, he could have said, I mean, the Almighty had said, my only son.
और कुरान में भी डायरेक्ट अल्लाह ताला ने कंडेम नहीं किया है इनके इस अकीदे के ऊपर.
Which belief are you referring to?
यही वाला कि वो हजरत ईसा अलैहिस्सलाम से भी है.
You see, the Quran did not need to do that. All it did was it corrected history, and it has in Surah Safat and in some of the other surahs has clearly said that it was Ishmael who was sacrificed. So therefore, I mean, instead of condemning them for this, what the Quran has done, and it does so in some other cases as well, that it only set right the history so that people know that, well, whatever else has occurred is just a misrepresentation of history. So it's less a correction that has taken place here.
Many thanks. Annie, you're next. Annie, please go ahead.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Two questions. One is, when these terms are used, Bani Israel, Al-Yahud, Ahl al-Kitab, Al-Ladhina Hadu, are these interchangeable in that, they refer to, the etymology that you shared about Israel? So are they all basically, people who follow from Jacob, or is there some nuance there in terms of Jews and Christians? And when we make a reference to Bani Israel, is that like all of them or a party of them? So that's my first question. My second question
the term
is that,
let me first answer this question. So the term Israelites or Bani Israel on most occasions refers to all of them as a whole, and because you'll find the way they are addressed as a collectivity. And similarly, Al-Lazina Hadu again is something. It's just a synonym. It's just a question of referring how they got their name. So Al-Lazina Hadu, of course, refers to the name, how they got the name of Yahud, or as the Quran would say, that their origin is divulged. So they are basically, I mean, they're talking about the same people. But as far as the fact is concerned, whenever the Quran speaks of them, does it speak of all the Israelites? Yes, on most occasions it does. But there are contexts in which this could be limited. And as I said, that again, the context is the final gives the final verdict in this regard. But in my study, I can say that I don't recall, at least at the moment, that they were used in a very specific sense. Yes, the word Israelites is referring to the followers of Moses, who had later on adopted this word, and they had come into Arabia very earlier on, and they were generally addressed as a totality.
Okay. And does that also encompass, because we see this distinction between Nisar, and Yahud later on, but does the phrase Ya Bani Israel address both of those categories or just the Jews?
It does. You see, the Nazarenes or the Nasara, they were later on followers of Jesus, and of course they are now a distinct community. But so the Israelites were the ones who were the followers of Moses. So basically, we have the Nazarenes who were the followers of Jesus, and we have the Israelites who were the followers of Moses. And we know that they are two distinct communities, and precisely that is why they are addressed separately. So Nasara is the Quranic word for Christians, and Hadu or Bani Israel is the Arabic word for the Jews.
Okay, all right. So Bani Israel does not include Christians. So thank you for that. My second question was that in the Quran, majority of passages which are overly critical of Jews are in Medina, which makes sense given the socio-political dynamics of
So
Medina.
let me interrupt you here. Actually, if you have a general question, we'll take it at the end. So at the moment, we are referring specifically the paragraph that we have studied, the 6 or 7 verses. So if you have a question regarding this paragraph, please, you have the chance to put it. Otherwise, if you have a general question, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is by Mr. Akram. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर
वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
सर मैं ये थोड़ा कंफ्यूज इसमें हूँ कि since Bani Israel did not believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the last prophet, and they do not believe in Jesus as a last. So who are they waiting for as the last prophet?
They are waiting for. They are still waiting for a Messiah. So they don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in Muhammad. So they are still awaiting the arrival of a Messiah. So that's exactly what they are doing.
Oh, so it has not been named like who is going to be.
No. So you see, they are still waiting for the third. For the arrival of the Messiah, and they think that the third temple, the third time that the temple is going to be built is by him once he arrives, and then he'll have that empire of the greater empire of Prophet David as addressed as is referred to in the Bible, or under their own understanding.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, sir. Thank you.
Many thanks, sir. We don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, so let's now move on to the next set of verses. I'll read 2 paragraphs because they are shorter ones. So the first is Ya Bani Israel uskuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum wa anni faddaltukum 'ala al-'alamin wattaqu yawman la tajzi nafsun 'an nafsin shay'an wa la yuqbalu minha shafa'atun wa la yu'khazu minha 'adlun wa la hum yunsarun. O Israelites, recall the favor I had bestowed upon you and the fact that I had exalted you above the people of the world, and fear the day when no soul shall be of use to any other in any way, to another in any way, and no intercession shall be accepted from it, and neither any compensation shall be taken from it, nor shall people receive any help. So you see that the first paragraph, which consists of 2 verses, it starts off with the same verse in which the previous set of verses had started off. Exactly the same expression, Ya Bani Israel. So you see, it started off with Ya Bani Israel. Now that address is taken up once again. And the Jews are informed that the place of exaltedness and superiority they had in this world was merely because of God's favor. It was not that they were entitled to it. And it was not because of their tribal nobility, which they thought. So therefore, they must not be overcome with conceit and vanity. And as far as the calls of their faith are concerned, they have to understand that this is where the Almighty is coming from, that He has sent the last prophet to which they were bound, and as a result, they had to follow him. And the implication is also that the Almighty, leaving aside all other nations, has specially selected the Jews. So you see, it says, Anni faddaltukum alal alamin. I have set aside all other people and chosen you to be the witnesses of the truth before other nations of the world. So the Almighty will reveal the truth before these nations through the Jews, to the extent that these nations are left with no excuse to deny it. In other words, the task of Itmam al-Hujjah, the task of delivering the truth in its ultimate extent, was the task which they were actually, what was made mandatory upon them. So when it says that as far as the Quran is concerned, that the favor which it talks about is that that the Almighty has exalted them. Remember, the words are Anni faddaltukum alal alamin. I have given you superiority over all other nations. What is the superiority? As I said, the superiority actually is that now they are witnesses to the religion of truth, and now they are responsible of disseminating this to other nations of the world. Okay, so the next thing that you have to understand from this paragraph is that the Jews should not remain under the misconception that since they are the progeny of such great prophets of God as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they would be salvaged in the hereafter merely because of this association. So you see, the words are, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمَ لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ شَيْئًا. that fear the day when no soul shall be of use to another in any way, and no intercession shall be accepted. So they thought that because they are the chosen people, they are people who are the followers of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they would be salvaged in the hereafter merely because of this association. Now they should bear in mind that in the hereafter, nothing but deeds will be of avail to them. So this second verse is basically directed to the fact that it's not that you are going to be salvaged because of this association, but yes, it is only when you are going to fulfill the promise which you are entrusted with to fulfill and do those righteous deeds will you be salvaged. And the important thing is that the reference to the promise the Almighty made with the Israelites in order to give them His Sharia after they had crossed the sea. So the period of 40 nights was necessary for the mental training that was required for them, which is coming up in the next part of the verse. It says, وَإِذْ نَجَّيْنَاكُمْ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ يُذَبِّحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ. And recall, when we rescued you from the Pharaoh's people, they would brutally torture you, slaying your sons by searching everywhere for them, and sparing your women, and in protecting you from this punishment, there was a great favor for you by your Lord. So the period of 40 days and 40 nights, as you'll see, is coming up later on. It tells us how the Almighty instructed the rest of the Israelites, and the training period, which was not only meant for Prophet Moses, but the rest of them as well. We shall see it goes through in the next part of this section of verses. But here, as you can clearly see, that they are being shown this part of the history, that how the Almighty actually protected them, how the Pharaoh was bent upon killing the young children, and he would kill those children, and he would let live the girls. And the Quran says, وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ, that when the Almighty actually was able to secure their release from the Pharaoh, then this was how they should recall that the Almighty did not let this happen, and they were saved from this ignominy. And so you see, it's a series of recalls in which the Almighty is always telling the Israelites, look how they continued to flout the promises, to dishonor the promises that they had made. So remember, just connecting the surah and its content to the main body of this whole surah, that basically it is charge sheeting the Israelites, it is charge sheeting the Jews for what they did in history. And as a result of this, now they are being deposed from their position of bearing witness to the truth. And it's not that the Almighty has done it out of His own whims. It is because of the fact that they promised certain things to be done before the Almighty. And every time the time came to fulfill that promise or to fulfill those promises, they miserably and they ravaged this promise in a way that, they themselves felt guilty of later on, as we can see that some of them did profess faith. So if you have any questions regarding these two paragraphs, please raise them, and then we'll go on to the next one.
Many thanks, sir. Ruhi, please go ahead. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, the line, it's probably 47 or 37. It's very small, I can't read it. The fact that the past tense is being used repeatedly here. Ya Bani Israel yaskuru ni'mati allati an'amtu, which I bestowed upon alaykum you, wa anni fazzaltukum, and gave you the superiority over all alamin. So this fact that repeatedly the past tense is being used here, it means that already God has decided that Bani Israel would be deprived of all those nemats and fazal that had been given to them.
Actually, I mean, this is the charge sheet which is presented before them. I mean, the Almighty has to pronounce His decision later on in the surah. So as the surah is progressing, their crimes are being enumerated, and they are being told that look what you did, look what you did. And you'll find the word is, which means to recall and to look back in history, occurs repeatedly in the surah. And it tells them that look what you did in the past. Now that you have continued to do it, now I'm going to depose you. So that decision of deposing them is going to come near the middle of the surah, when they will be deposed and the Bani Ishmael would be given the position. So it's not that the Almighty has taken this decision. He is referring to what they did in the past. I mean, when it says that Uskuru Ne'mati Allati, the words are that you people are the ones, or your forefathers were the one who did this and who did this, and now that you are also following their footsteps, a time is now coming that because of these misdeeds, your position of responsibility is now going to be taken away from you. So it's like recalling history one by one, recalling their crimes one by one, and then, as you'll see when we reach the middle of the surah, that the Almighty says that because of all these crimes and because of all these blunders that you made and continue to make still now, that we are now deposing you and replacing you with the Bani Ismail.
The next question is by Annie. Annie, please go ahead.
Thank you. So is there a difference between Fadl and, Nema when we read it in the Quran, or do they mean the same thing?
You see, if you talk about this particular passage, then it is the same. But this is not the case at all instances. I mean, they are used in a context, but because we know that the Nemat that they were given and the Fadl they were given were the same. They were given this position of authority, this position of Shahada. Here it is like they are used as synonyms. But this is not the case in other parts of the Quran. As I said, they'll have to be studied or understood case to case.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that. So, there's this implication of, preferring one group of people over the other and creating, this inequality amongst, the recipients of God's blessings. So is this earned or is this just bestowed? So
no, actually, this is like saying that God has chosen them for a task. I mean, it's like being put in a position of responsibility, just as God does with us. I mean, He selects individuals, gives them responsibilities. So at one instance, He chose a whole ummah for a certain responsibility. So it's like giving them a responsibility. And that responsibility meant that they were given certain obligations to carry out. And if they carried out those obligations, of course, they would be fulfilled. As far as other nations are concerned, they were at the receiving end. So to them, it was, I mean, if they received their, whatever they wanted to have done, if they received them with open heart and they followed what they were told, I mean, they would have been rewarded in the same way. So it's just a question of who is given what responsibility. So one nation was given the responsibility of delivering the truth. The rest of them were given the responsibility of accepting the truth. So the reward would hinge on the fact that which of those discharge their duties in a befitting way. It's not that they are superior and they have been chosen for this task and hence they will have more reward. No, this is like saying that I'm giving you this responsibility of becoming the CEO of this let's say this organization, and the rest of the people are the people that you're going to serve. And of course, the other people would not be denied any reward, but because the reward is not dependent on what obligation you are given, it's more dependent on the attitude that you adopt. So the reward is going to be the same. I mean, it could be more reward for the recipients if they outshine the givers. So this should not be a means of distinction. This is just a question of people being assigned different responsibilities in a particular set of time.
And the people in this context are, the nation following Moses and thereafter or before?
The Israelites are, of course, the nation of Abraham, descended from is Isaac, and it refers to nations which did not belong to this progeny, and therefore you can say that they were the ones who were responsible to deliver the truth to the Ishmaelites in the 2,500 years that they were there. So, for example, from Prophet in the times of Prophet Isaac right up to the end into Prophet Jesus' time, they had the responsibility of delivering the truth to the Ishmaelites and to the other nations of the world. After all, there were other nations who existed alongside them.
Many thanks. Imran Sahib, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much for all the explanation. I just wanted to ask, since you have studied Bible also in detail, does the Old Testament confirm or also reflects the same notion that Quran depicts here, which makes perfect sense, that if they're chosen for a task, and if you fail the task, then the task is given to someone else. Do we get anything like that from the Old Testament, or it's been completely changed? Thank you.
No, as far as the fact is concerned that they were given this responsibility, and so that is depicted in historical incidents. So you see, because that responsibility was shifted away from them once Prophet Muhammad arrived. So the Torah could not have spoken about that. So they were given this leverage or this freedom until Prophet Muhammad. So before that, I mean, the Torah had finished its revelation in the times of Moses. So it could not have said something like that. So all that the Torah says, as we have just seen, that Prophet Moses in the book of Deuteronomy has said that the Almighty is going to reveal, is going to send us a prophet like me, and then the words of the Almighty which are quoted in the Torah are that if they don't accept this promise, if they don't honor this promise, then I'm going to take you to task. I'm going to take you to account. So this clearly shows that they were given this responsibility, they accepted it, and they were also warned that if you shirk this responsibility, if you fail in this responsibility, then the Almighty is going to punish them.
I see. Thank you, ma'am. So basically, the Old Testament also says that if you don't fulfill your promise, you're going to just lose. Yes. You're not chosen because of your ancestry or your genealogy. Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Next question is by Ahmed Sahab. Ahmed, please go ahead.
Dr. The Quran is saying that the God has saying that He has chosen this nation according to His own knowledge. How come God has chosen that knowledge on the basis of knowledge, and that nation is gone so far away from the things that God is required for them?
When it is said that God has chosen a nation on the basis of His knowledge, it doesn't mean that they are people who are going to be successful. I mean, it's not that people who are successful who have been chosen by the Almighty. It actually says that the potential that they have is that they're given this position, and if they honor this position, the potential which is already there is something in which if they live up to their potential, then they will live up to the task. So what the Almighty is saying is that according to His knowledge and information, these are the people who can do it if they try to do it. So it's not that He is, destined them or ordained for them to do it. So it's like having the fact that in His own knowledge, He knows that these are the people who can fulfill the responsibility if they make that effort. So you see, the effort part has to come from them. God is just going to speak about the potential.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no further questions. Please go ahead.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part, the next set of verses. This is these are 3 paragraphs. In fact, these 3 very short ones. وَإِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرَ فَأَنْجَيْنَاكُمْ وَأَغْرَقْنَا آلَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَأَنْتُمْ تَنْظُرُونَ وَإِذْ وَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 40 لَيْلَةً ثُمَّ اتَّخَذْتُمُ الْعِجْلَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ وَأَنْتُمْ ظَالِمُونَ ثُمَّ عَفَوْنَا عَنْكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ وَإِذْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَالْفُرْقَانَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. And recall when we parted the sea, taking you along with us, and in this manner saved you. And before your very eyes, we drowned the Pharaoh's people in the same sea. So antum tanzurun, and you were onlookers to us. You were witnesses of how this took place. And recall when we made the promise of 40 nights with Moses. Then in his absence, you stuck to that calf, and at that time you were being unjust to your souls. Yet after this too, we pardoned you, so that you might become grateful. And recall when we gave Moses the book, which was the criterion between the good and evil, so that you might receive guidance through it. So you clearly see that the Torah, or the book of God given to Moses, was also called the Furqan, which is the criterion of truth and falsehood. So once again, you can see that the Almighty is making them recall that look how things happened in history and how every time the hand of God came and saved them. So the promise of the Almighty made with the Israelites, in order to give them His Sharia, this is that part of history once they had crossed the sea. So the period of 40 nights was necessary for the mental training that was required for them to become the recipients of a book. So they were, in order to train them, they were made this promise that for 40 nights they would be there. And this period initially was for 30 days. But when Prophet Moses reached the mountain of Sinai before the appointed time, the Almighty extended this period to 40 days in order to train and instruct him. So basically, it was this thing that has been mentioned there. And then you can see that the incident of worship of the calf, which is again mentioned in the Quran, you see, referring to the fact that this is what they did in the absence of Moses when he had gone to the mountain to receive the Sharia, to receive the Torah. In his absence, they became entangled and incriminated with the worship of the calf. Now you see, as you go along, how frequently the Quran is making references to the Torah and the Old Testament, and unless you read the Old Testament, unless you refer to it time and again, you'll not be able to fully understand some of the important points which the Quran is making. Now, interestingly, you might note this, that in the Torah, in the Old Testament, what has happened is that the Jews have been incriminated with the prophet Aaron leading them astray in worshipping the calf. So the way this incident is portrayed in the Old Testament is that the Jews were led away, they were made to worship the calf because Prophet Aaron, who was of course Moses' brother, he was left in charge of them when Moses went to receive the Sharia. So the Torah says that it was he who had led them to worshipping the calf. And I'm going to read that's a part of the Torah from you to see how the Quran again has corrected them here, that it is not Aaron or not Prophet Harun who was responsible for this, but it was basically they themselves who were guilty of this. So I'm going to read a part of the Old Testament once again. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 32, verses 1 to 10, and see how the Torah in a very different fashion portrays this whole incident. So it says, when the people saw that Moses was long gone in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. And for this fellow Moses, who brought up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. Then they have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, 'These are your gods. These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt.' I have seen these people." The Lord said to Moses, "They are stiff-necked people. They are people who are arrogant. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them and I may destroy them." So you see that basically it is these people who were guilty of going to Aaron and then incriminating him to the fact that, yes, he is the person who is responsible for making them worship the calf. And this incident of the calf, you can see, is also mentioned the way the Quran has mentioned it, by referring to the fact that this is the crime that they did. But look what the Quran has said, وَثُمَّ عَفَوْنَا عَنْكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Then we pardoned you from this. We forgave you so that you would become grateful. Even such a heinous crime as associating the calf in worship was something which was later on forgiven by the Almighty. And lastly, as you can see, that the word Furqan, as I just pointed out, is also used for the Torah. So the Furqan or the Mizan are two terms which the Quran uses for itself also, which mean that it is the criterion, it is the ultimate standard between truth and falsehood. And precisely this status was also occupied by the Torah. And this is, of course, at the time that the Torah was revealed in its original form, it had this status of judging between right and wrong. And as the Almighty says, that this is what he had done in the past, and this is how they were guilty, as you can see in the earlier part, that they hid the Torah, they changed it, they interpolated it at instances, they mingled up the predictions or the prophecies of the arrival of the last prophet, and they severed the connection of Abraham with the land of Arabia, so that they could justify the fact that, yes, Isaac was a son who was sacrificed, and it was not that it took place in the land of Arabia, but it took place actually in the land of Palestine. So I'm going to end my session here on this verse, which is verse 53. Inshallah, we'll study the next verses in our next session. So now you can ask questions regarding the paragraph that we have studied, and also, any other question that might come to your mind.
Thank you very much, sir, for a beautiful session today. The next question would be from Noshaba. Noshaba, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, the ayah which we read that was ta'inu bis sabr was salah. So can you explain a little bit more, like how we can get help with patient and with pray?
I think this is something which is, evident, very self-evident, that when you say wasta'inu bis sabri was salah, the fact is that obtaining strength and resolve through perseverance and patience is so apparent. So, unless you have that patience in you, unless you are steadfast, you just cannot, fare well in life. So the Almighty says that in order to follow all these commandments, or in order to follow the fact that you have to honor your commitment with the Almighty regarding the last prophet and some of the other things which are mentioned in that passage, this can only be done if you are patient, if you persevere, because yes, if you accept them, there are going to be trials and tribulations, there are going to be untoward circumstances which might arise, but it is only perseverance which is going to help you in sailing through these rough seas. And the second thing which is said is bis salah, and that is something which is also, I think, very, very evident, that something which gives you inner strength in order to follow the directives of the Almighty, in particular the ones that are mentioned in that passage, is that when you connect yourself to God through the prayer, when you connect yourself to God in a way that you feel that you are being looked after by Him, you're talking to Him and He's replying back in a very subtle way, you feel that inner strength. You draw upon that inner strength, and as a result, you are able to follow God's directive. So I think it is so natural, and in compliance to this directive also, in a very different note, the Prophet himself is also reported to have said that about him, whenever he would find things going against him, or whenever he would find himself in adversity and a lot of pressure, then he would just read the 2 rakats of prayers, and he would just beseech the Almighty. Of course, besides the prayers that he would offer, which are the 6 prayers, besides the 5 prayers that we also offer. So whenever he would feel that discomfort, he would just take to namaz, to the prayer. So it's like a revival of your mental connection with the Almighty, and the greatest strength which our soul can draw is to that connection. So it is this that is being referred to here, that yes, you have to draw this strength from patience and through the prayer. And then look at what the next part of the verse says. It says, وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ, that even after seeking help through patience and the prayer, following these directives is not easy. إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ, except those who fear God, and الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ, they are the ones who have this hope and expectation that one day they're going to meet their Lord in the hereafter. So their driving force is that hereafter, that yes, we are going to meet Him. So if we are going to meet Him, then we have to behave in accordance with the directives and principles that we are enjoined to follow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir.
Many thanks. Annie, you're next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So everything that's mentioned in verses 50 to 53, are we to understand that it's in a chronological sequence, that what's in 50 happened first, then what's in 51, then what's in 52?
That's not the case. That's not the case. I mean, these are various parts of the history that are being referred to, and it's not necessarily chronological or historical. They are made to be, to recall them in a certain sequence, which is like telling them that, look, this happened, and this happened. It's not that this happened in the same sequence. It's just that these are the things which happened, and they were guilty of breaching and not fulfilling what they had been made to ask.
So I ask it because in some translations, after verse 50, the translators start with then, and then 52 they would say then, which implies a chronological sequence. But in the translation you shared, you start with and.
Yeah.
So could you expound on that?
So you see, as I said, what is actually means and recall and bear in mind. So I don't know how translators have come up with the word then. And if I also interpret the word then, because there are instances in the word in which the word then can also be interpreted as and. So when it says then, it is not necessarily that the second then is coming after the first. It's like saying that this happened and this also happened, this has also happened. So you will find that the word then is also at times used not in a sequence, but to refer to the fact that these were random things that happened, but they did happen. So then this happened and this happened. When I also say this in these words in English, or maybe in some of the other languages by using the same synonym, it's not always the sequence which I am implying. Yes, there are instances in which the sequence is being implied, and then but then there in that instance we have a very strong indication from the text itself. But as I said, it's not that the fact that the word then is always used for something which is coming after the previous one. Even the word then is used to stress or emphasize the fact that a separate incident occurred, and it has no historical sequence with the previous one.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned that the earlier scriptures hold Aaron responsible for making the calf and leading the people into worshipping the calf, and Quran doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Quran, later it talks about it holds Samaritan responsible for having people worship the calf, but it still implies that the Samaritan was able to deceive a prophet, i.e. Aaron. Because later, Moses also asks Aaron, why didn't you come after me? And Aaron, says, don't blame me.
Actually, you see, what it doesn't mean that the Samaritan was able to deceive Aaron. This is not. You'll find when you read Surah Taha and some of the other places in which this incident is discussed in detail, he actually tried to stop them from doing this, and they did not listen to him. And I mean, as you can see, that because of the fact that Moses was long gone, and they had this inclination that they need someone to worship, and someone who can see from their eyes and see, I mean, visually observe, that they went as far as to do this. So it's not that I mean, the Samaritan got the better of Aaron. Also, he in fact was the one who stopped them. And it was Moses who, in his anger, when he came back, he thought that perhaps Aaron did not do his responsibility, and that is why Aaron is reported to have said, "La ta'khuz bil lihyati," oh my brother, do not snatch my beard, or do not pull me by the beard. I'm not the one who did this; it is the Samaritan who did this. So actually, in other instances or in other parts of the Quran, he has been absolved from this blame.
But Moses wasn't gone for too long. He was only gone for 30 days or 40 days, if you look at other places.
Well, you see, when the way Moses was with them, he was giving them, direction every time that they needed this direction. He was with them for a long period of time when they were in that desert. So you see, these pitfalls, they don't need to come for a long, when a prophet is absent for a longer period of time. 30 or 40 days in the absence of a person who was there with them 24 hours is sufficient for any person, to be led astray. So remember, he was like a shadow to them. He was always there for them.
Many thanks. The next question is by Ruhi. Ruhi, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my question is almost similar to the one just asked before me. That the Bani Israel, they don't seem to be to have been believers, the staunch believers of what Moses have been telling them about God and all the injunctions and do's and don'ts about the religion. And so most of them, it seems that they just came out from the city just to get rid of the zulm of the king of that, what was that?
Of the Pharaoh.
The Pharaoh. They wanted to get rid of the zulm of Pharaoh, and they just accompanied Moses and
so what exactly is your question? Yes, you are right about that.
Most of them didn't believe, sir, I think most of them didn't believe in that, in Moses, his religion or whatever he was teaching them. That is
So you
why
see,
in such a short period of time, they just got astray.
you see, what happened is that, I mean, there were people who did believe in them. He had Joshua with him. He had Caleb with them. The Torah speaks of many people who professed faith in Moses. Yes, as a collectivity, they continued to bother Moses. But even from their own generation, we find the Jews ultimately in the times of Prophet Muhammad professing faith in Prophet Muhammad. So many Jews who existed, whose families existed from the times of Moses, they were righteous Jews. They were the ones who, in their private capacity or in their individual capacity, they professed faith in the last prophet. So the Quran actually speaks of those people in very laudable terms, that they were the ones who were actually waiting for the last prophet. And when he came, he professed faith in them. So you have to make this distinction that as a collectivity, yes, they were ones who were always, had their own, they wanted to follow their own, and they were consistently pestering Moses and later on other prophets as well. They were guilty of killing prophets as well, as the Quran says. So this was a collective crime that is being talked about in the Quran. But individually, as I said, there were many Jews who were righteous individuals, and as I said later on, they were so righteous that as soon as Prophet Muhammad arrived, they professed faith in him.
Many thanks. And next question is by Imran. Imran, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, thank you very much. Just quickly, one question which I have thought about even before: why the Jews elected to make a calf, a golden calf? Like, why not another animal? What is there a connection between their history, in their history with calf, and does their own scripture says anything about their behavior? Thank you.
I don't think so. I think this was basically a prank played by a Samari, as the Quran calls him. Samari, he was a Samaritan, and it caught their fancy. I mean, when you make such a thing, and it also, I mean, there was a voice which came out of it, so it just caught their fancy, and they stuck to it. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that there is a connection in which a calf had a certain significance in their traditions or conventions. It was just that novelty, I would say, in which he presented the whole situation, that they became enamored with it, and they just fell for it.
But why would people of Bani Israel would go for idol worshipping? Did they idol worship because they were next to idol worshippers in Egypt, but they themselves believed in one God? But soon after they were rescued, they crossed the water and they were rescued, they fell into idol worshipping.
Yes, you see, what has happened is, again, this is human nature, that it unless you have stably and very understandably and in a very rational way accepted certain facts and discovered them yourself, they are not long lasting. So it does seem that when they professed faith in Moses and they professed faith in one God, this was something which, of course, had to take place when Moses was to be given the Torah. But before the Torah was given to them, he actually, yes, he was guiding them, he was telling them. But it does seem that guidance and that information that they gained from Moses had not deeply taken roots in them. And because of their proximity to other people who were already incriminated with polytheism, and because of this human nature in which you feel that security, in which you think, yes, there is someone that I can visualize, and someone that I can see, which is always there. It seems that this vacuum was there in their collectivity, and they stuck to it.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Next question is by Riaz. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Doc. Now we understand at the end of the paragraph that Allah forgave them for believing in Kaf. But my understanding is that the people who believed in the Kaf were killed by their own brethren. Is that
right?
They were not forgiven.
That's true. So you see, Fauna Amkum min Ba'da Zalika means that once this had taken place, they, as a collective, I mean, they were not destroyed collectively, but those who had professed faith and they were there, they were still made to survive, and they continued as people. So otherwise, such was the nature of their crime, that they could have been totally destroyed and finished as a nation. But God forgave this this collective mistake. So this forgiveness relates to the collectivity, that they still survived they continued to be a nation who was given this responsibility of disseminating the truth. So individually, yes, they were punished for the crimes that they did, and each individual who was guilty of this of shirk and polytheism, he was put to death. But as a collectivity, the Almighty forgave them. So this forgiveness relates to their collectivity, and as a result of which they continue to live as a person or as a nation that was chosen for this task. So they were not deposed at that time as they were later on.
Thank you.
Next question is by Noshaba. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, my question is when we are reading these ayahs or any other ayat from the Quran, so what is the lesson for us and how we find what we need to do in our daily life when we read it?
So you see, this is basically history being narrated before the Ishmaelites, the followers of Prophet Muhammad, the Bani Ismail, the Sahaba, and the people of Arabia in those times, that look, this is what happened in the past. Look, this is how the Almighty, who had promised at the time of Adam, when he was made to spread, and his progeny was made to spread and inhabit this earth, that he will send guidance at every instance of time. And people who would profess faith in that guidance would end up in paradise. So you see, you have to connect this to the very first promise which the Almighty had made when Adam and Eve were sent in this world. And he had said that whenever this guidance would come to you, if those who accept this guidance, they will succeed. So right after that, we have a whole series and progression of prophets being sent by the Almighty. And the last of this was, of course, the progeny of Abraham, who were then selected not on an individual basis, but as a whole race. So what the lesson that we can draw is that the promise which the Almighty made, that he would send prophets of God to guide mankind every time they would falter, was fulfilled. And in all the times, in all these times of these messengers, the Almighty actually made them visualize the hereafter by giving them a glimpse of a lesser day of judgment that took place on the face of this earth. And therefore, when we are reading this Quran, we must not forget that when these nations were taken to task for their betrayal, for dishonoring their promise, if we continue in their footsteps, our fate is not going to be any different. The only thing is that our fate has been deferred to the day of judgment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, sir. So, sir, for every ayah, like the passage you read today, so is whenever we read, there's a lesson for us, or like we whole surah?
The lesson is in the collective history. You see, these are the charge sheets. I mean, this is the whole charge sheet was presented against the Jews, and this part of history is a part of a greater whole in which the Almighty is telling them that how when people disobey the Almighty, they are taken to task in this very world. So it's like the Almighty's law of retribution that is going to manifest itself on the day of judgment. The Almighty is telling them, or telling us who are living today, that look how his law is absolutely unbiased. It is absolutely, it measures everyone by the same yardstick. And in his messengers' times, he punished people in the same manner he will punish them in the hereafter. So basically, it is this law of retribution which the Almighty is continuously reminding people living in the post-prophetic era, people like us, that look here, you have to always remain aware of the fact that this accountability is going to take place for a whole lot of nations. It took place in this world, and they were doomed or rewarded, whatever the attitude they adopted in consonance with that. Yours will be no different as well. So you see, the lesson has to be drawn in an overall way, because in a particular passage, I mean, it's a part of a greater grand scheme in which the crimes are being narrated. So the result is something that you have to draw in an overall way. It's not that each and every verse is going to give you guidance. Each and every verse is part of a greater version through which you have to obtain that guidance.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Next question is by Bisma. We only have 3 minutes left. Please go ahead, Bisma.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question is that, it seems that the Bani Israel seem to have more of a visceral dislike for the Bani Ismail than they do for the Nasara, who actually, orchestrated the killing of Christ for all practical purposes. Why is that? And, in your estimation, why is that so?
But I think it's both ways. You see, they were guilty of denying Jesus and they were guilty of denying Muhammad. I mean, it's not that they have a specific preference for one of them. This is the charge sheet which the Quran has presented in Surah Hadid. When we study that they have denied two prophets. It's not just one prophet. They were guilty of denying and Jesus. They were guilty of, attempting to kill him. And they regarded Muhammad the first, when he came in his own times, to be an imposter. So it's not just this with one faction that they have this attitude. So it's basically the fact that because, of course, the progeny of Jesus is still from their own progeny, maybe we feel that as if the venom is not there, and the venom is more for their cousins who have come from a different part, from a different lineage altogether. And this is also because of the fact that basically the Jews were the people who had been entrusted in the Torah, that they are the ones who must follow the last prophet. Otherwise, this is one area that I do feel that their venom is really, it really stands out. Otherwise, it's the same for the followers of Jesus as well. And remember what the Quran has said, that it says that that because of this behavior of denying Prophet Jesus, forever they'll remain subservient to his followers. So, this is a huge ignominy. So the Jews have been doomed in a way that they are being told that for the rest of their life, once they have denied Jesus, they'll always remain subservient to the followers of Jesus. So I think this is something even greater than they can think of regarding the followers of Muhammad.
Thank you very much. We have 1 minute left and one question. Annie, please go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is again reading 51 and then 53 and then 54. So it seems that where in 53 where it says that God gave Moses the scriptures, so that happened after Moses came back. So that happened after those 40 nights when the people had taken to worshipping the calf. So which implies that at the time that they took to worshipping the calf, perhaps the Itmam al-Hujjah hadn't yet happened. But then in 54, the people who went astray are slayed. So why were they punished if the guidance wasn't complete at the time that they went astray?
So you see, in the presence of a prophet of God, this is something which is, it does not require a scripture which needs to be, divulged in a way that unless you have that scripture with them, that you are to be punished. Shirk in itself, or polytheism in itself, is a practice which the Almighty is going to punish if it is done deliberately. And this is something which they did so, which is evident from the Torah as well. And the Quran is even more clear. So basically, as far as that Itmam al-Hujjah was concerned, this was something that was already there for them. They were the nation of a prophet. They were with him. The prophet was with them in Egypt. They had come out from Egypt. The truth had been conveyed to them. And basically, this Itmam al-Hujjah, at the time that they were put to death, had been done on them. I don't see this not happening.
Thank you very much for attending this lecture today, all the dear participants and my dear teacher. Thank you so much for a wonderful time. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you. Inshallah, we'll see each other next week.